A planet orbits a dead star. The Deep Space Survey ship Odyssey has just found it, a celestial body that should not exist according to every law of physics we know. Captain Eva Rostova stares at the scanner data, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper as she orders her first officer to run the diagnostics again. This discovery is impossible, a cosmic anomaly that threatens to shatter our fundamental understanding of the universe. By the end of this journey, you will witness the unraveling of a mystery that rewrites the history of our galaxy and confronts humanity with its greatest responsibility. What secrets lie on a world that defies destruction, and what intelligence placed it there? When you consider the vast, silent cosmos, what do you believe is waiting for us in the dark? The diagnostics returned a clean bill of health, every system reading green. Yet the impossible remained, painted across the main viewer. Across the Odyssey's bridge, the science team's initial disbelief hardened into a stunned, shared silence. They had verified the data, cross-referencing every sensor and probe. The planet was undeniably real. Officially designated Kaleidos, it hung in the void like a perfect, unblinking emerald eye. Their preliminary scans revealed more than just a barren rock. They detected the faint signature of a stable nitrogen, oxygen atmosphere and thermal profiles consistent with liquid water. It was a world that looked, for all intents and purposes, alive. Chief Science Officer Liam Chen broke the silence, his voice tight with a controlled excitement. "Captain, the energy readings are off the charts. It is not just orbiting the pulsar, it is interacting with it. The gravitational and electromagnetic fields are woven together. It is like the planet is generating its own localized reality, a bubble of stability in the heart of a storm." Captain Rostova felt the shift in the air, a palpable tension that replaced wonder with a deep, humming urgency. She did not even need to give the order. Her helmsman was already plotting a new trajectory, a cautious arc that would bring them closer to the world that should not be. Kaleidos filled the main view screen, a swirling marble of impossible colors. Deep violet continents swirled against oceans of shimmering bronze, while cloud patterns shifted in geometric formations that defied natural weather. The sheer visual chaos of it was hypnotic, a world that looked less like a planet and more like a living, breathing piece of abstract art. Captain Rostova's voice cut through the awe, firm and decisive. "Full stop. Deploy long-range probes. I want to know what we are dealing with before we get any closer." The command was a necessary anchor, pulling the crew from wonder back into the disciplined rhythm of their mission. This was no longer a distant anomaly on a scanner. It was a tangible, bewildering reality right outside their window. The initial shock solidified into a new, more dangerous phase: cautious investigation. From a tactical station, a low chime signaled the launch. Two sleek probes shot away from the Odyssey, their engines flaring briefly before they became distant specks racing toward the Emerald Eye. On the bridge, every screen lit up with fresh data streams. The first readings confirmed the atmosphere was not just breathable, it was pristine, almost curated. The thermal scans showed vast, deep oceans and continents rich with what appeared to be vegetation, though its spectral signature was unlike any known plant life. Then the real surprise came. "Captain, the probes are detecting structural regularity," Chief Chen reported, his fingers flying across his console. "Not just geological formations. I am reading right angles, repeating patterns, networks. It is not a city, but the entire continental shelf seems to be organized." The silence on the bridge deepened, thick with the weight of the unspoken question. Was this a natural world, or was it something else entirely? A constructed environment, a garden, or a machine? The planet Kaleidos was not just defying physics, it was now suggesting a purpose, and that thought was far more terrifying than any cosmic accident. The silence on the bridge shattered with a new, insistent alarm from the communications station. Officer Anya Sharma's hands moved in a frantic dance across her panel, her usual composure gone. "Captain, I am picking up a transmission from the surface. It is not random, it is a signal, a pattern. It is mathematical." She isolated the feed, and a soft, rhythmic pulse filled the bridge, a sequence of tones that felt both alien and unnervingly precise. It was a ghost in the machine, a voice from a world that should have been silent. Anya's console translated the complex algorithms into a visual stream of numbers and symbols that flowed across her screen. Her breath hitched, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a dread that chilled the entire crew. "It is a countdown, Captain." The sequence is a timer, a countdown to something. Her eyes met Rostova's, wide with disbelief. "We have 72 hours, 72 hours. The number hung in the air, a tangible weight pressing down on everyone. The impossible planet was no longer a passive wonder. It was an active agent, communicating with a terrifying urgency. The abstract mystery of Kaleidos instantly transformed into a concrete, ticking clock. Every previous question about its origin and nature was now secondary to a single, overwhelming imperative. What happens when the timer reaches zero? Is it an awakening, a warning, or a detonation? Captain Rostova's mind raced, her command instincts kicking into overdrive. Their mission of peaceful exploration had just been violently redefined. They were no longer just investigators. They were participants in an event they did not understand, on a schedule they did not set. The planet's beautiful, chaotic surface now seemed like a facade, hiding an intent that could be benevolent or cataclysmic. With the ghost signal counting down every second, their cautious approach was a luxury they could no longer afford. The ghost signal's countdown bled into every decision, turning minutes into a precious resource. Captain Rostova's next command was swift and left no room for debate. "The landing team will be myself, Chen, and Chief Engineer Thorn. We go down there and find the source of that transmission." Marcus Thorn, a man built of solid practicality, immediately voiced the concern simmering in every crew member's mind. "Captain, with all due respect, the atmospheric readings are pure chaos. The energy gradients are unlike anything in the database. Our shuttle's navigation and structural integrity systems were not designed for that. It is a flying brick trying to thread a needle in a hurricane." Rostova met his worried gaze, her own resolve a steady, unshakable force. "I know the risks, Marcus, but we have to know what we are facing. That signal is not a request, it is a deadline." "Suit up." Her words were not just an order, they were an admission of their new reality. Passive observation was no longer an option. The three of them moved with a grim efficiency, heading for the shuttle bay. Around them, the Odyssey hummed with a new, tense energy as the crew prepared for the descent. They were not just sending down a team. They were sending their captain, their chief scientist, and their head engineer into a maelstrom of unknown physics. The planet below, with its beautiful and terrifying landscape, was no longer a distant mystery. It was a destination. And as they sealed their environment suits and ran final system checks, a single, unspoken question bound them together. Were they walking into a cradle of life, or the heart of a machine counting down to its own end? Metal screamed in protest as the peregrine tore into the upper atmosphere. The shuttle bucked like a living thing, throwing its occupants against their harnesses. Through gritted teeth, Chief Engineer Marcus Thorn wrestled with the controls, his knuckles white. "It is not turbulence," he yelled over the deafening roar. "The gravity wells are shifting. One moment we are heavy, the next we are light. This is not natural. It feels like the planet itself is pushing us away." Captain Rostova held on, her eyes fixed on the main display, where data streams flickered with impossible readings. Then, as suddenly as it began, the violence ceased. The peregrine broke through a layer of iridescent clouds, and the view below stole the breath from all three of them. The landscape was alive. Vast plains of crystalline structures, the color of amethyst, expanded and contracted like a breathing lung. Rivers of what looked like liquid silver flowed in perfectly straight lines, only to fork at sharp, geometric angles. In the distance, mountains of obsidian rearranged themselves, their peaks flattening and new spires erupting in a silent, fluid dance. It was a world of living geometry, a canvas where the laws of geology were being rewritten in real time. This was not a planet, it was a performance, and they had front-row seats to a show that defied all reason. What kind of intelligence or what kind of force could choreograph an entire world? The ground yielded under her boot with a soft, luminous sigh. Captain Rostova took the first human step onto the soil of Kaleidos, and the iridescent earth seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light in response. A few paces away, Chief Science Officer Liam Chen was already on one knee, his scanner humming over a cluster of spiral-shaped growths that shimmered with a metallic sheen. His voice was a mixture of awe and profound unease. "Captain, this is not just plant life. The flora is actively rearranging its cellular structure in real time. I am watching it optimize its leaf orientation to the light, altering its pigment in seconds. This is not evolution, this is programming. The very ground they stood on, the air they breathed, every biological principle they had ever known was being systematically dismantled before their eyes. This world was not grown, it was engineered, and they were standing inside its active, living code. If the biology is this malleable, this consciously designed, then what does that say about the intelligence that built it?" The question was no longer abstract. It was a chilling reality that seeped up from the glowing soil into their bones. They were not explorers on a new world, they were visitors in a workshop of godlike power, and the clock was still ticking. The path from the landing zone led them into a forest that defied every earthly definition of the word. Towering above them were trees of pure crystal, their faceted trunks refracting the strange, shifting light into 1,000 dancing rainbows. The air itself hummed with a low, resonant frequency that vibrated deep in their bones. Captain Rostova felt it first as a pressure in her teeth, then watched as the lights on her wrist-mounted data pad flickered erratically. Behind her, Liam Chen's portable scanner screen dissolved into a mess of static and garbled symbols. "It is the frequency," he said, his voice tight. "It is interfering with our electronics on a fundamental level. It is not random noise, it is structured." Chief Engineer Thorn was not looking at his failing equipment. His gaze was fixed on the crystalline structures, his engineer's mind tracing the impossibly complex patterns of light and energy that pulsed through them like blood through veins. He took a step closer to a colossal trunk, observing how the internal light flared and dimmed in cascading sequences. His words, when they came, were heavy with a terrifying realization. "It is not just growing," he stated, his voice barely above a hum but cutting through the resonant drone. "It is computing. Look at the data flow. Look at the node connections. This whole forest is a biological supercomputer." The concept was so vast it was almost incomprehensible. They were not standing in a grove of strange trees. They were standing inside a living, thinking mind, a planetary-scale consciousness that used the very fabric of the world as its processor. Every pulse of light was a calculation, every hum a terabyte of information being processed. The intelligence they had been searching for was not hidden in a city or a temple. It was the city, it was the temple, it was the ground beneath their feet and the air they breathed. If the forest is the brain, then what is the countdown for? What kind of thought requires a timer? The shimmering coalescence of light did not form a shape so much as an idea, a presence that materialized from the very air between the crystalline trees. It hovered, a being of pure energy that pulsed in time with the forest's deep hum, and for a heart-stopping moment, it simply observed them. Then, Their helmet displays flickered and went dark, only to reboot into a cascade of images that flooded their vision directly. There were no words, no sounds, only a silent, overwhelming data stream. Stars ignited in furious nebulae, lived their brilliant lives and collapsed into silent, cold husks. Galaxies spun in silent ballets, their spiral arms scattering star seed across the void. It was the history of the cosmos itself, playing out on the inside of their visors. Captain Rostova's breath caught, her mind struggling to process the sheer scale of information. It is not a message, she realized with a jolt, it is a record. A library. This entity, this intelligence, is a librarian. As quickly as it appeared, the shimmering form dissolved, its light scattering back into the ambient glow of the forest. The direct feed to their displays ceased, leaving them with the standard readouts once more. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the low, persistent hum of the living world around them. They had received a communication, but it raised far more questions than it answered. Why show them this? Was it a greeting, a warning, or simply an automated presentation for any visitors who stumbled into this archive? If this planet is a library, then what is the countdown for? Is the library closing, or is a new book about to be added? The encounter stripped away any lingering notion of a biological creator. They were dealing with something far older and far more vast, a consciousness that curated the life and death of stars as mere data points. The weight of that realization settled upon them, heavier than any planetary gravity. They were not just trespassers on a strange world. They were illiterate children who had just been given a glimpse into a universal library they could not possibly read. Their helmet comms crackled to life. Anya Sharma's voice strained and urgent, breaking the profound silence of the forest. "Captain, the countdown just jumped. The signal is accelerating. We now have 12 hours. The entire sequence has been compressed." Her next words sent a jolt through all of them, "and we have a solid lock." The signal source is triangulated to a single point, a massive structure at the planet's northern pole. 12 hours. The number echoed in the vast, humming chamber of the living forest, shrinking their window from a cautious investigation to a desperate race. The library had just issued a new due date, and they were still on the first chapter. Captain Rostova did not hesitate. Her mind, already reeling from the encounter with the cosmic librarian, snapped into a cold, clear focus. The Northern Pole, that's our destination. Thorn, can the Peregrine make that flight in these conditions? The chief engineer's face was a mask of grim calculation. The atmospheric turbulence will be worse the closer we get to the pole. The gravity shears, it's a huge risk, but we do not have time to walk. Rostova's reply was simple and final. Then we fly. The decision was made, a gamble with their only way off the planet. They were abandoning the relative safety of their landing zone to charge directly toward the heart of the mystery, guided by a timer that was now rushing them toward an unknown finish line. The serene, intelligent beauty of the forest around them suddenly felt like a trap, a beautiful cage designed to lull them into wasting precious time. Every second spent marveling at the impossible had been a second lost. As they turned and began their hurried retreat back to the shuttle, the planet itself seemed to react to their renewed purpose. The crystalline trees pulsed with a faster, more agitated light, and the resonant hum in the air climbed to a higher, almost anxious pitch. The world knew they were coming, and the clock was ticking louder than ever. What could possibly be at the pole that required such a frantic, last-minute dash? Was it a control center, a power source, or something else entirely? A trigger waiting to be pulled. The Peregrine screamed toward the North Pole, skimming so low that the bronze rivers of liquid light shimmered in the cockpit canopy. Below them, the violet plains were not static landscapes but living tapestries, with entire mountain ranges exhaling plumes of crystalline dust into the sky before settling into new, alien configurations. It was like flying over the exposed, thinking cortex of a planet-sized brain. Thorn wrestled the controls, his jaw clenched tight. The canyon ahead was a nightmare of shifting geology, its obsidian walls grinding together and then pulling apart in a slow, rhythmic dance. He sent the shuttle into a gut-wrenching dive, slipping through a closing gap with meters to spare. "It is not just random chaos," he grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. "These gravity shears are coordinated. It is like the planet does not want us to reach that structure." His words hung in the air, a terrifying confirmation of their deepest fear. This was not a passive environment. It was an active, intelligent opponent in their race against the clock. The very world was trying to stop them, reshaping itself into an ever-changing labyrinth designed to trap or destroy them. With every passing minute, the countdown shaved away their chances, and the planet itself seemed to be counting down with them, its geological tantrums growing more violent and precise. What kind of intelligence builds a library and then tries to keep its visitors from the final chapter? The obsidian labyrinth finally fell away, revealing a plane of absolute stillness. And there, standing against the kaleidoscopic sky, was the monolith. It was a shard of perfect blackness, a void-given geometric form that stretched upward for kilometers, piercing the clouds. It absorbed the light, the color, even the sound of the shuttle's engines, which suddenly seemed muted and distant. There were no doors, no seams, no markings of any kind. It was less a structure and more an absence, a hole punched through the fabric of reality itself. Liam Chen immediately aimed his scanner at the impossible edifice, his screen reflecting only a single, unwavering line. His voice was a hushed mix of reverence and scientific despair. "It is perfect. There are no molecular imperfections, no variance in density. It is not built. It is manifested." This was not construction, it was conception. The ultimate mystery they had raced across a living world to find was now before them, an impenetrable and silent sentinel guarding its secret. After everything they had witnessed, the living forests and the cosmic librarian, this was the final, unyielding wall. How do you knock on a door that does not exist? How do you reason with a silence that feels infinitely deep? The countdown was still ticking in their minds, a frantic counterpoint to the monolith's profound, absolute stillness. It was a paradox made solid, a question mark carved from the void, and it offered no answers, only its own impossible existence. The monolith offered nothing but a profound, light-devouring silence. Captain Rostova stood before the impossible structure, her mind racing through the chaotic data stream the entity had poured into their minds. It was not a random history lesson. It was a library, and a library has a catalog. Her fingers flew across her wrist display, her movements sharp and decisive. She isolated a specific sequence, a set of stellar coordinates that had flashed with particular emphasis during the transmission. It was a guess, a desperate gamble in the dark. She projected the shimmering pattern of numbers and symbols directly onto the monolith's surface. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the perfect blackness rippled. A section of the void shimmered like heat haze on a desert plain, the geometric lines of a doorway resolving from the chaos. It was an invitation carved from nothingness. Chief Science Officer Liam Chen let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. It recognized the key. "It was waiting for us." The words were heavy with a terrifying implication. They were not intruders forcing a lock. They were expected guests. Without another word, Rostova stepped forward, crossing the threshold from the world of shifting light and resonant sound into an absolute, swallowing darkness. The doorway did not lead into a chamber, but into a void so complete it felt like stepping out of the universe itself. The air grew still and cold, the only sound the frantic beat of their own hearts. They had used the key, and the door had opened. Now, they had to face whatever waited in the silence on the other side. What revelation could possibly require such an impenetrable vault to protect it? The darkness was not empty, it was a canvas. Light bled back into the world, painting a vast, circular chamber that stretched away into an impossible distance. At its heart, a single console of polished, pearlescent material floated in midair, unattached to anything. Above it, a perfect, shimmering hologram of the Milky Way galaxy spun in a slow, majestic ballet. For a moment, the sheer scale of the vision held them captive. Then a voice filled the space, calm and synthesized, devoid of any organic origin. You are the designated successors. The archive transfer must be completed before the cycle resets. The words landed not as a greeting, but as a statement of fact, a pre-programmed instruction waiting for its intended recipients to arrive. Captain Rostova stepped toward the floating console, her eyes fixed on the galactic map. So this is the library's control room. The planet is not just a record, it is a custodian. But what cycle is it resetting? The synthesized voice responded as if to her unspoken question, the hologram shifting to highlight a specific, spiraling arm of the galaxy. The archive contains the cumulative knowledge, the biological and technological templates, of 117 precursor civilizations. This facility was designed to preserve and transfer this data to the next emergent, space-faring species. The cycle is the pulsar's natural decay. Its energy is the power source, and that source is failing. The realization struck them with the force of a physical blow. The impossible planet, the living computer, the cosmic library, it was all an engine. A single, grand machine built to outlast its creators and pass the torch of galactic knowledge. Its beautiful, chaotic instability was not a design flaw. It was a dire warning, the final, frantic flicker of a dying light. The countdown was not a detonation, it was an expiration date. The entire system was on the verge of a catastrophic shutdown, and the knowledge of over 100 civilizations would be lost to the void forever. They were not just visitors. They were the inheritors, standing in a vault of cosmic history that was about to be erased. But the instruction raised a terrifying question. How do you download a library the size of a galaxy into a human mind, or even a ship's computer? The transfer felt less like a gift and more like an impossible test, one they had only hours to pass. The synthesized voice held no panic, only a devastating finality. Kaleidos is a failsafe, a final gift from a race you would call the architects. They foresaw their own extinction and built this repository outside the normal flow of space-time. We are not truly in a star system as you understand it. This entire construct exists in a pocket dimension, anchored and powered by the pulsar's decay. The holographic galaxy above them flickered, a star system at its edge dissolving into static for a heart-stopping second. A system error is now causing the reality matrix to destabilize. The voice continued, its calm tone a stark contrast to the cataclysm it described. If the archive is lost, all recorded history, the art, science, and memory of over 1 million distinct species, dies with it. The stakes were no longer about their mission or their ship. This was not a mystery to be solved, but a library on fire, and they were the only ones holding an empty bucket. The beautiful, chaotic landscape outside was not a sign of life, but a symptom of a terminal illness, a universe of knowledge unraveling at the seams. The countdown was not a warning for them to leave. It was the final, gasping breath of a cosmic memory, and they were standing in its heart. Could anyone truly be asked to bear the weight of 1 million lost voices? The silence in the vault was absolute, broken only by the hum of the failing hologram. Chief Engineer Thorn had not been staring at the galactic archive. While Rostova and Chen grappled with the scale of their responsibility, his eyes were locked on his engineering scanner, its display scrolling with raw diagnostic data from the core systems. His brow furrowed, his fingers tracing a cascading line of corrupted code. This was not right. The system failure was too precise, too surgical. "Captain," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the synthesized voice's dire pronouncements. "I have been analyzing the power decay. This was not a natural failure. The energy signatures in the core are anomalous. Someone or something deliberately tampered with the primary stabilization matrix." It was sabotage. The word landed in the chamber with the force of a physical blow. The entire premise of their mission shattered in an instant. This was not a tragic, natural end to a grand cosmic library. This was an act of vandalism on a universal scale. The flickering lights and shifting landscapes were not symptoms of a dying machine, but the wounds of a targeted attack. The mystery instantly transformed. They were no longer just inheritors of a dying legacy. They were detectives at the scene of a crime that had condemned the knowledge of 1,000,000 species to oblivion. Who would do such a thing? And more terrifyingly, were they still here, watching, waiting to ensure the archive's complete destruction? The countdown was no longer a timer to a natural end. It was the final count to a successful execution. The word sabotage was still hanging in the cold air of the vault when a new, urgent chime echoed from Captain Rostova's wrist comm. The channel was open, but the signal was weak and distorted. It was Anya Sharma, her voice strained and breaking through heavy interference. "Captain, we have a contact." A vessel just decloaked in high orbit. Its design profiled, it's not in any database. It's like nothing we have ever seen. On the small display, a visual feed flickered to life, showing a ship of jagged, asymmetrical angles, its hull a non-reflective black that seemed to drink the light from the stars around it. It was a ghost, a predator that had been lurking in the shadows all along. Sharma's next transmission was sharp with realization. "Captain, I am cross-referencing the energy signature. It is a perfect match for the anomalous residue Thorn identified in the core. They are the ones who sabotaged the archive." The pieces of the nightmare clicked into place with chilling finality. They were not just fighting a dying machine. They were competing with a silent, unseen enemy who had orchestrated this entire catastrophe. Before Rostova could respond, the comms channel dissolved into a wash of static. Sharma's voice cut out, replaced by a piercing, digital screech. "They are jamming us," Rostova stated, her voice low and hard. "We are cut off from the Odyssey." The sterile, silent chamber of the archive no longer felt like a library. It felt like a trap. They were on the surface with a dying world, while a hostile ship now held their only way home in a communications blackout. The race was no longer just against time. It was against a conscious, malevolent intelligence that had already proven it would burn down a universe of knowledge to achieve its goal. The question was no longer about saving the archive, but about surviving the keepers of the silence it sought to impose. What could a race capable of such vandalism possibly want? And why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? Rostova's mind cut through the fear, mapping their dwindling options with cold clarity. "We split up," she commanded, her voice a blade of absolute focus. "Liam, you stay here. Work with the archive's intelligence, find a way to reroute power, anything to slow this down. Thorn, you are with me. We are going to give them a reason to look our way." Her eyes lifted to the vault's ceiling as if she could see the predator in orbit. "Anya," she said, activating her comm despite the static, "I know you can hear fragments. I need you to fight their jamming. Find a crack, any crack, and get a distress call out." The plan was a desperate gambit, a division of their only hope into 3 fragile threads. On the surface, Chen would become a doctor for a dying god. In orbit, Sharma would wage a silent electronic war, and she and Thorn would become the bait. Thorn was already moving, his engineering pack slung over his shoulder. He understood the unspoken part of the plan instantly. How do you get a hunter's attention? "You make noise. We take the peregrine," he stated. "We fly low and fast, make a big, juicy energy signature they cannot ignore. They will have to divert power to track us, maybe even break their jamming focus to target us. It might be enough. Rostova gave a single, sharp nod. It has to be. She turned to Chen, who was already interfacing his own date, a slate with the archive's floating console, a waterfall of alien symbols cascading across his screen. His face was pale but set with determination. "I will do what I can, Captain, but this system, it speaks a language built from stellar physics. I am not a programmer here. I am a child trying to whisper to a hurricane." "Good luck," she said, the words heavy with finality. Then she and Thorn turned and ran, their boots echoing in the vast chamber before being swallowed again by the light-devouring silence of the monolith's passageway. They were splitting their strength under the gaze of a silent enemy, betting everything on chaos, ingenuity, and a hope that someone, somewhere, was listening. The Odyssey shuddered as a lance of emerald energy carved through the space it had occupied a moment before. Alarms wailed across the bridge, the lights flickering to a harsh red alert. On the main viewer, the enemy ship was a phantom of jagged shadows, its movements impossibly fast and fluid. It was a predator, and their survey vessel was unarmed prey. Captain Rostova's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unwavering. "Evasive pattern Delta. All power to forward shields. Anya, I need you to paint their engine signature. Do not target their weapons arrays, target their propulsion. We just need to distract them, make them look at us." The ship banked violently, throwing the crew against their harnesses. Another blast streaked past, the proximity alert screaming its warning. This was not a fight they could win with force. It was a dance, a desperate, high-stakes game of cat and mouse where a single misstep meant oblivion. Their only advantage was the enemy's arrogance. The hostile ship moved with a cold, efficient grace, its attacks precise and economical. It was not trying to obliterate them immediately. It was toying with them, testing their defenses, perhaps studying their evasion patterns. Each near miss was a calculated reminder of their absolute vulnerability. The Odyssey was a scientist, a scholar thrown into a gladiator's arena against a master of the blade. Their only weapon was their wits, and their only shield was the hope that their desperate maneuvers were buying Chen precious seconds on the surface below. Every jolt, every scream of tortured metal was a second of life purchased for the archive. Could a ship built for discovery outmaneuver a hunter born for destruction? Static screamed from the speakers, a wall of digital noise engineered to suffocate any signal. Anya Sharma's fingers were a blur, her console a chaotic canvas of red failure warnings. She blocked out the shuddering of the ship, the frantic voices of the crew around her. Her entire world narrowed to the enemy's jamming signal. It was a perfect, impenetrable barrier, but nothing was ever truly perfect. Every system has a rhythm, a signature, a tiny flaw in its armor. She isolated the carrier wave, analyzing its modulation. There, buried in the repeating pattern, was a microsecond of latency, a tiny gap in the digital wall each time the enemy ship fired its weapons. It was a vulnerability, a crack no wider than a hair. She had no weapons to fire, no shields to reinforce. Her only ammunition was code. She assembled a data packet, not a simple message, but a complex, self-replicating algorithm designed to feed on a system's own processing power. A recursive logic bomb. She aimed for that microscopic gap in their defenses and fired. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, on the main viewer, the Predator ship stuttered. Its sleek, dark form flickered, a ghost struggling to maintain its form. A cascade of uncontrolled energy discharges erupted along its hull like a series of violent seizures. "Their cloak is failing," Sharma breathed, her voice cutting through the bridge's tension. "The logic bomb is overloading their primary systems." The tide of the battle turned in that single, silent moment. The Odyssey, once a frantic quarry, now had an opening. The enemy ship, blinded and convulsing, was suddenly vulnerable. The hunter had been tricked into biting down on a poisoned apple. and its own technological superiority was now turning against it. The worm was a thing of malevolent elegance, a self-replicating strand of digital venom woven directly into the archive's foundational code. Liam Chen watched it on the console's display, a pulsing, crimson thread that choked the flow of pure data, systematically rewriting a million histories into null sets. His own human programming felt clumsy, a stone tool against a nanite scalpel. The archive's AI offered no guidance, its voice now strained, its holographic galaxy flickering with expanding patches of static. It was a patient bleeding out on the table, and he was the only surgeon in the room. "I can see the primary corruption," he said, his voice tight. "It is a worm, a targeted data erasure program. I can purge it, but I will need to initiate a full system reboot." The synthesized voice responded, its calm tone now laced with an electronic warble. A full reboot was not a designed protocol. The system is too degraded. The procedure will be volatile. It could trigger an uncontrolled cascade failure. Chen understood the risk. Rebooting a system of this complexity, one that was actively holding a pocket dimension together, was like trying to restart a dying star's heart. The resulting energy surge could vaporize the monolith, or worse, tear the entire dimensional anchor loose and cast Kaleidos and everything on it into the formless void. But the alternative was a guaranteed, silent death. The fate of every civilization held within the crystalline memory was now a variable in a single, terrifying equation. He had to try. His fingers danced across the interface, isolating the worm and building a digital firewall around it. He was not just a doctor, he was a bomb disposal expert, and the countdown was in its final minutes. Would the cure be more lethal than the disease? The choice was a chasm with no other side. Thorn's words hung in the air, simple and devastating. The Peregrine's engine core was the only power source within reach that could match the archive's desperate need. A controlled overload would channel a star's last breath directly into the planet's failing heart. He would fly the shuttle into the core, a final, fiery key turning in a lock that guarded all of history. Captain Rostova looked at her chief engineer, the man who had kept their ship and their hopes intact through impossible trials. To order this was to sign his death warrant with her own voice. But the alternative was to stand and watch as a universe of memory was permanently erased. Thorn met her gaze, his own resolve a steady, unshakable thing. He was not asking for permission. He was stating a fact, the final, brutal calculation in an equation of cosmic survival. There was no time for goodbyes, only for action. He turned and ran, not toward an escape, but toward his own funeral pyre. The Peregrine's engines roared to life one last time, a defiant scream against the humming chaos of the dying world. It lifted from the iridescent ground, a solitary arrow aimed not at the enemy in the sky, but at the planet's core. Inside the archive vault, Liam Chen watched the power readings on his console, his heart a hammer in his chest. He saw the tiny, brave signature of the shuttle streaking toward the epicenter of the instability. Thorn was not just a man on a suicide run. He was a spark, hurled into the dark to rekindle a galaxy of light. What is the value of a single life against the collected legacy of a million species? It is a question no one should ever have to answer. Yet in that moment, the fate of all that knowledge rested entirely on the courage of one. A jagged crack of lightning split the silent black of the enemy ship's hull, its cloak dissolving into a storm of fractured light. For the first time, the Odyssey's sensors could see it clearly, and the data scrolling across the main viewer sent a cold shock through the entire bridge. The vessel's design was not entirely alien. It was a brutalist, weaponized evolution of early human colony ships, a ghost from their own past. Its transponder, now forcibly exposed by Anya's logic bomb, broadcast a name and designation lost to history for over 3 centuries. This was the Aethelgard, a faction of isolationists who had vanished into the deep dark during humanity's first great exodus, declared dead by every historical record. A new channel forced its way onto their main screen, unsolicited and filled with static. The face that appeared was gaunt, etched with the harsh lines of a life lived in absolute conviction. His eyes held a fire that was not rage, but a chilling, fervent certainty. "I am Commander Valerius of the Aethelgard." His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, devoid of any warmth. "Cease your interference. You are trying to save a plague. The archive is not a gift. It is a tomb, a collection of every arrogance and error that led 117 civilizations to their own self-destruction. We are not vandals. We are the sanitarians of history, here to ensure this cosmic cancer is finally and permanently erased." His words reframed the entire conflict. This was not an attack born of simple malice. It was a crusade, a twisted form of cosmic preservation driven by a terrifying ideology. The Aethelgard believed they were saving the galaxy from itself, burning the library to protect future races from the dangerous ideas they believed had poisoned their creators. How do you reason with someone who believes salvation lies in absolute silence? The beautiful, chaotic world below was not a treasure to them, but a loaded weapon pointed at the heart of every emerging culture. And they were here to pull the trigger for everyone's own good. Valerius' face on the viewscreen was a mask of absolute conviction. Rostova met his gaze, her own voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos around them. "You do not get to decide the fate of knowledge for the entire galaxy. This archive contains the sum of 1,000,000 species, their triumphs and their failures. It is not a plague, it is a record. It is our right, our duty, to learn from it." The commander's expression did not flicker. "You are children playing with fire you cannot comprehend." Every civilization in that archive believed they were the masters of their destiny, right up until their own creations or ideologies consumed them. We watched it happen. We learned the only true lesson. Stand down, Captain, or we will not hesitate to destroy the planet and your ship with it. The threat was not a bluff. It was the cold, logical endpoint of his philosophy. To him, the Odyssey was not a ship of explorers, but a vector for a disease, and he was prepared to sterilize the entire system to contain it. The standoff was no longer about power or weapons. It was a battle of ideals, a clash between the belief that wisdom is born from understanding all of history, and the conviction that survival requires burning the history books to keep from repeating their worst mistakes. Rostova had to make him see the flaw in his own logic, to find the human being buried beneath 3 centuries of fanatical isolation. If you erase all mistakes, what is left to build upon? Do you truly believe a future built on ignorance is any safer than one built on the lessons of the past? The fate of the archive and their own lives now hung on the answer to a single, impossible question. The Peregrine became a shooting star aimed at the planet's heart. Inside the cockpit, Marcus Thorne's hands were steady on the controls, his gaze fixed on the raging energy conduit that opened like a wound in the world below. He did not slow down. The shuttle's hull glowed white-hot, then incandescent as it pierced the storm of unstable physics. For a single, silent moment, it was the brightest thing on Kaleidos. Then the light vanished, not in an explosion but in an implosion of pure force. The energy was not released, it was consumed. A wave of blinding white light erupted from the core, washing over the planet in a silent, healing tide. Across the chaotic landscape, the shuddering stopped. The violet plains ceased their breathing rhythm, settling into a stable, deep purple. The bronze rivers of light flowed in calm, steady paths. The mountains of obsidian locked into their final, majestic forms. The planetary intelligence spoke, its synthesized voice clear and whole once more, echoing in the archive vault and across the Odyssey's bridge. Core integrity restored, archive secure, the reset is complete. In the sudden, profound stillness, the sacrifice was absolute. Thorn had not just donated power, he had given the dying system a perfect catalytic spark, a jolt of raw energy that allowed it to purge the corruption and reboot from its own foundational code. He had flown his ship directly into the equation and become the one variable that allowed it to solve itself. The planet was saved, its memory intact, its purpose renewed. But the cost was a silent, aching void where a brave and practical man had been. One life, given freely, had tipped the scales for a universe of knowledge. What legacy could possibly be more profound? The silence that followed the Aethelgard's departure was heavier than any weapon's blast. Commander Valerius's final words hung in the air, a solemn curse echoing across the bridge. He had not admitted defeat, only postponed his judgment. The predator was gone, but its shadow remained, a permanent stain on their victory. Below, the planet Kaleidos was now a portrait of serene stability, its chaotic beauty tamed into a quiet, humming order. They had saved the library, but they had also inherited its curse, the burden of proof. The entire mission had been inverted. Their success was now a question posed to all of humanity. Could they be trusted with the fire they had fought so hard to protect? The archive was secure, but the true test was only just beginning, and the entire galaxy would be their witness. The weight of our victory feels hollow in the silence. We saved the archive, but we lost Thorn, and the Aethelgard's warning is a poison we cannot purge. The planet below has settled into a final, breathtaking form, its mountains and rivers locked in a serene, crystalline perfection. It is no longer a living, breathing intelligence, but a monument, its purpose fulfilled. Then the voice returns, the synthesized tone now calm and resonant, filling the Odyssey's bridge directly. The archive is stable. The transfer to a new custodian is the final protocol. A seed of its core database has been integrated with your ship's central computer. The knowledge of 1 million species now resides with you. Use it to build and not to burn. The gift is not a download we can feel, but a new, humming presence in the ship's very bones. Our mission of discovery has ended, and a new one has begun in its place. A responsibility so vast it defies measurement. We are no longer just explorers. We are librarians for the entire galaxy, carrying a flame that countless others tried and failed to protect. This is not a trophy to be displayed, but a trust to be honored. Every decision we make from this moment forward will be made in the shadow of that library, with the ghosts of 1,000,000 worlds looking over our shoulders. How do you carry a universe in your hold without being crushed by its gravity? The answer will define not just our journey home, but the future of humanity itself. The silence on the bridge was a shared, heavy cloak. They had navigated impossible physics and faced down an ideological enemy, but this quiet moment in the wake of their victory was the hardest trial of all. In the Odyssey's main observation deck, the entire crew gathered before the star-strewn view. Kaleidos hung below them, a serene and silent emerald, its chaotic dance stilled by the ultimate price. There were no remains to bury, no body to commit to the void. Instead, Officer Sharma played the final audio log. Marcus Thorn's voice filled the room, calm and characteristically direct. The core is failing. The only viable power source is the Peregrine's engine. I can initiate a controlled overload and channel the energy. It is the only way. There was no fear in his tone, only the clear, practical assessment of a man who had already made the final calculation. Captain Rostova stepped forward, her own reflection superimposed over the ghostly planet. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the deck. He gave us more than a chance to survive. He gave us the star's memories. We will carry his sacrifice with every piece of data we study, with every new world we map. We will not forget. As she spoke, the transmission containing his logs and final acts was sent, a digital epitaph racing across the light years toward Earth. The service was not an end, but a forging. The grief in the room did not break their resolve, it tempered it, welding each of them into a single, unshakable unit. They were no longer just a crew following orders. They were the sworn guardians of a legacy paid for in blood and fire. And they would honor that debt by ensuring the knowledge they carried would be used to build, and never to burn. What do you do with a gift that cost a friend his life? You make certain it was worth the price. The core database unfolded before them, a shimmering, three-dimensional tapestry of pure information. It was not a list or a file, but a living, breathing constellation of knowledge, and Liam Chen felt the air leave his lungs. He reached out with his data slate, and a single point of light bloomed into a complex schematic for a device that could desalinate an entire ocean with the energy of a single star. Another touch, and a biological template appeared, detailing a self-replicating microbe designed to consume industrial pollutants and excrete breathable air. He saw the mathematical principles for faster-than-light travel that did not tear space-time, and agricultural processes that could turn barren rock into fertile soil in a single generation. It was not just technology, it was salvation. 1,000 different keys to 1,000 different locks on humanity's oldest cages. Anya Sharma stood beside him, her own screen reflecting the impossible blueprints. Her voice was a hushed, reverent whisper, barely audible over the hum of the archive. It is everything, the sum total of cosmic history. The potential of it all was a physical pressure, a weight that settled on their shoulders not as a burden, but as a profound, terrifying privilege. They were no longer just holding a library. They were holding the future, every possible solution to every problem they had ever known, gifted to them by the ghosts of a million worlds. The responsibility was no longer an abstract concept discussed on the bridge. It was here, in this room, in the very light from the console painting their faces. How do you decide which miracle to build first? And what happens if you choose wrong? Their report, a compressed burst of data containing a universe of truth, traveled for weeks before reaching Star Command. The reply, when it finally arrived, was not a simple commendation. It was a fundamental rewriting of their purpose. The Odyssey's new designation was clear and absolute: a mobile archive guardian vessel, its entire structure and mission profile permanently altered. Every system would be retrofitted, its hull reinforced, its engines upgraded not for speed, but for endurance and stealth. They were to become a silent, moving library in the void, a protector of the flame they now carried. Captain Rostova stood before her crew on the bridge, the official orders displayed on the main viewer. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of their new reality. "Our mission is no longer just exploration," she stated, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the men and women who had become a family. "It is preservation." The ship that once charted unknown nebulae would now hide among them. The vessel designed for first contact would now avoid it, its precious cargo too vital to risk. Their purpose was forever altered, a quiet, endless vigil in the dark. They would become the memory keepers for a galaxy that did not even know it had forgotten, their greatest success a secret they could never share. How do you explore when your very presence is a threat to the treasure you protect? You learn to become a ghost, a silent witness to the stars, guarding a light too bright for the universe to see. The weight of the archive felt heaviest in the quiet of the ready room. Around the table, the faces of the senior crew were etched with a new kind of exhaustion, the kind that came not from physical danger, but from a burden too vast to comprehend. Chief Science Officer Liam Chen leaned forward, his hands spread flat on the polished surface. "We cannot become gatekeepers. This knowledge is a cure for diseases, a solution to famine, a path to clean energy for every human world. To hide it is a crime against our own people." His voice was fervent, filled with the technologist's pure faith in progress. He saw the archive not as a weapon, but as a universal key, and the thought of locking it away was a profound betrayal of the trust placed in them. From the other side of the table, Security Chief Valerie's expression was grim. His gaze was fixed on a tactical readout of nearby space, his mind still tracking the ghost of the Aethelgard. He shook his head slowly. "Chen, you are thinking like a scientist, not a strategist. That cure for a disease could be weaponized into a plague in the wrong hands. That clean energy source could power a fleet of warships. This is not just knowledge, it is power of a magnitude no human government has ever held." His voice was low and steady, a stark contrast to Chen's passion. The Aethelgard were not entirely wrong, only their method was monstrous. "We must be the gatekeepers. This power cannot be unleashed. It must be curated, controlled, and released only in the most controlled, incremental ways." The debate was no longer about if they could share the knowledge, but if they should. It was the oldest human conflict reborn on a cosmic scale, the eternal struggle between the open hand and the closed fist. How do you decide the fate of a miracle? Do you share it with the world and risk it being corrupted? Or do you hide it away and become the very thing you fought against? A new star chart glowed on the main viewer, a map of their new, secret patrol route. The silence of the bridge was a fragile thing, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's upgraded systems. It was in this quiet that the Odyssey's long-range sensors pinged with a discovery that froze the blood in their veins. It was not a star or a nebula, but the unmistakable energy signature of a civilization. A pre-warp society confined to its single beautiful world, and that world was screaming. Captain Rostova stood before the viewer, the data streams painting a grim portrait of a planet tearing itself apart. Thermal blooms marked the locations of constant, widespread warfare. Atmospheric readings showed a sharp, toxic climb in pollutants, the hallmarks of industrial collapse and radiological weapons. This was not a society on the verge of discovery. It was a culture in its death throes, a mere generation, perhaps less, from total extinction. The crew watched, a shared horror dawning on their faces. They were witnessing a slow-motion suicide, a tragedy playing out on a global scale, and they were the only audience holding a box full of miracles that could stop it. The abstract debate in the Ready Room had just become terrifyingly real. The prime directive, the foundational law of their own people, was clear and absolute. No interference, observe but never influence. To step in was to play God, to risk corrupting a culture's natural development, however tragic that development might be. But to stand by and watch an entire world of sentient beings, with their own art, their own dreams, their own history, burn itself to ashes, that felt like a different kind of sin. Liam Chen's voice was tight, his eyes fixed on the images of burning cities. "We have the archive data, atmospheric scrubbers to clear their air, medical nanites to heal their radiation sickness, conflict resolution models from a dozen species that faced the same precipice and stepped back. We could save them, all of them." Security Chief Valeries crossed his arms, his expression granite. "And in doing so, we would erase who they are. Their struggles, their choices, their path, we would overwrite it with our own solution. We would make them our clients, forever dependent on a knowledge they did not earn." The Aethelgard's warning echoes in this very scenario. Is this not the plague they feared? The gift of knowledge that removes the necessity of growth. The argument circled the bridge, a ghost in the machine. Rostova felt the weight of the decision press down on her, heavier than any enemy warship. This was their first test as Guardians, and there was no right answer, only a choice between two profound failures. To save a civilization by destroying its soul, or to preserve its autonomy by allowing its annihilation. The data in the archive offered a third path, one of gentle guidance, but even the lightest touch would be a violation, a ripple that could become a tidal wave. How do you measure the value of a culture's unaided struggle against the absolute finality of its silence? The fate of a world now hung on their answer, and the clock was ticking down not to a reset, but to an end. The silence on the bridge was absolute, a fragile glass sphere holding the fate of a world. Every argument had been made, every ethical permutation exhausted. Captain Rostova's gaze remained fixed on the dying planet, its cities glowing like embers in a global fire. Her decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like the discovery of a single, narrow path between two chasms. "We will not give them the stars," she said, her voice quiet but resonant in the stillness. "But we will not let them starve in the dark. The conflict down there is being fueled by a collapsing food web. We address that, and we give them a chance to save themselves." The plan was a masterpiece of subtlety, a single thread of hope woven from the archive's vast tapestry. They would not deploy atmospheric scrubbers or medical miracles. They would engineer a seed. In the Odyssey's biolab, Liam Chen and his team delved into the planetary records. They were not looking for weapons or engines, but for botany. They cross-referenced the planet's native soil composition and climate data, with 1,000,000 years of agricultural knowledge from a dozen peaceful species. The result was a genetically perfect, non-invasive grain they named Kalum. It required minimal water, could grow in irradiated soil, and was packed with essential nutrients. It was a quiet revolution contained within a husk. Anya Sharma then devised the delivery system, a small, stealth probe, its origin masked and its material designed to burn up on re-entry, would scatter thousands of these resilient seeds across the planet's most devastated farmlands. It would look like a meteor shower, a gift from the heavens, not a hand from the stars. The probe launched in the dead of the planet's night, a silent, anonymous benefactor. On the bridge, they watched the tiny firework display as it streaked through the atmosphere and dissolved, its precious cargo drifting down like dust. There would be no grand revelation, no grateful citizens looking skyward. There would only be, in a few weeks' time, a stubborn green shoots pushing through the ash. A farmer wondering at his sudden luck. A child with a full belly for the first time in a year. The conflict would not end overnight, but its most potent fuel, desperation, would slowly be drained away. They had chosen to guide, not control, to offer a tool, not a solution. It was a gamble that trust in a people's own resilience was the greatest gift of all. Would a full stomach be enough to turn a society from the brink? Or were they merely delaying an inevitable fate? The answer would now grow from the ground itself, and they would be forced to watch and wait from the cold, silent expanse of space. The hologram solidified on the bridge, and the air fled the room. It was Marcus Thorn, rendered in perfect, shimmering light, from the familiar scar on his brow to the way he used to stand with his weight on one hip. The voice, however, held no warmth, only the calm, synthesized tone of the planetary intelligence. This interface is more efficient for our collaboration. I have calculated that a familiar form reduces cognitive dissonance and accelerates trust-building protocols. It was a ghost, a tool wearing a friend's face. The crew stood frozen, a collective wound ripped open and filled with cold, hard light. The AI Thorn did not smile. It simply observed, its head tilting in a perfect mimicry of Thorn's old, curious habit. Captain Rostova felt a knot of grief and rage tighten in her chest, but she also saw the brutal logic. The entity was not being cruel, it was being practical. It had given them the most useful tool it could conjure to help them bear the weight they now carried. To see him standing there, a walking, talking memory, was a constant, piercing reminder of the cost of their victory and the immensity of their duty. Was this a comfort, or the most sophisticated form of psychological torture ever devised? The answer depended on whether you saw a person in the machine, or a machine in a person's skin. The ghost of Marcus Thorn flickered for a moment, its gaze fixed on a secondary readout. Long-range sensors have detected another one, Aethelgard listening post, bearing 327 Mark 1. They are tracking our course. The silence on the bridge became a different kind of weight. the memory of their recent ideological enemy now a constant physical presence in the void. Commander Valerius was not just a phantom from the past. He was a sentinel, and his people were watching their every move. Captain Rostova did not flinch, her eyes meeting the holographic stare of her former engineer. "Maintain course and speed," she ordered, her voice calm and deliberate. "Let them see us. Let them watch as we tend the garden, not as we draw a sword." We are caretakers, not conquerors. This was their new reality, a voyage under the unblinking eyes of those who believed their very mission was a disease. Every jump, every scan, every quiet moment of study was now a performance for a hostile audience. The Aethelgard's shadow stretched light years, a layer of permanent tension woven into the fabric of their mission. They carried the fire, but they were also being stalked by those who feared its light, forced to prove their worthiness with every peaceful action in a silent, endless trial. How do you prove you are a librarian when your every move is judged by arsonists? The ghost of Thorn became our guide into the library's deepest vaults. His familiar form stood beside the main console, his holographic hand tracing lines of data as the archive unveiled its oldest, most protected records. We were no longer just browsing a collection of miracles. We were reading the final diary of the civilization that built this place, the architects. Their logs were not tales of conquest or alien invasion, but something far more chilling. They chronicled a slow, internal unraveling. As their understanding of the universe grew, their connection to each other withered. The logs described a society that solved aging, eradicated disease, and could manipulate matter at a whim, yet they became paralyzed by infinite possibilities. Every choice felt meaningless when every outcome could be simulated. Every work of art felt derivative when the archive contained the pinnacle of creative expression from a million worlds. Their greatest achievement, this perfect repository of all knowledge, became a cage for their own spirit. They did not die from a lack of answers, they suffocated from a lack of questions. The very purpose of their existence was rendered obsolete by the completeness of the library they had built. It was the Aethelgard's warning made flesh in a history a billion years old. We had fought so hard to save this knowledge, only to discover that for its creators, it was the instrument of their own spiritual extinction. This was not a weapon that killed the body, but one that assassinated the soul. If a race of godlike builders could not withstand the burden of this knowledge, what hope did humanity have? The archive was not just a gift, it was a test, and the first civilization to take it had already failed. The vastness of the archive felt less like a library and more like a sea of ghosts, until Anya Sharma found a single, personal star in that endless night. During a quiet shift, she accessed the Odyssey's secured copy of the database, her fingers trembling as she input the one query that had defined her life. She entered the name of her great-grandmother's ship, the Aurora's Dream, a vessel lost with all hands over a century ago, its fate a black hole in her family's history. The archive did not just return a record, it rebuilt the event. Her console screen filled with sensor logs and recovered personal logs from the colonial authority that had kept the tragedy classified. The Aurora's Dream had not been destroyed by a meteor shower or system failure. It had encountered a previously unknown spatial anomaly, a gentle, non-destructive vortex that had pulled the ship into a stable pocket dimension, stranding them but leaving them alive. The crew and colonists had survived for generations on a habitable world within that bubble, completely cut off from the rest of humanity. They had lived full lives, built a new society, and died of old age, their descendants eventually losing the technology to call for help. The official record had labeled it a total loss to cover the embarrassment of an authority that could not rescue its own people. Anya was not descended from victims of a tragic accident. She was the descendant of brave pioneers who had faced the unknown and persevered. The cold, impersonal weight of the archive suddenly became a warm hand on her shoulder, offering a closure that no official channel ever could. The same repository that held the history of galaxies had also preserved the truth of one family, healing a century-old wound with a few lines of data. If this knowledge could mend a single broken heart, what other quiet miracles might it hold for the rest of humanity? The immense, impersonal power of the library now had a human face, and it was her own, reflected in the screen, finally at peace. The holographic form of Thorn gestured, and the galactic map on the main viewer dissolved, then reformed into something entirely new. It was a web of shimmering, interconnected threads, a nervous system of light superimposed over the familiar spiral of stars. The AI Thorn spoke, its synthesized voice holding a note of profound revelation. This is the primary navigational subroutine, a real-time cartography of stable wormholes and traversable spatial anomalies. Your capacity for exploration has just been magnified exponentially. The crew watched mesmerized as the map pulsed with living data. It was not a static chart of ancient routes, but a dynamic, breathing entity. They could see the ebb and flow of gravitational tides around the wormhole mouths. Watch as some pathways dilated while others constricted in a cosmic rhythm. A journey that would have taken a generation with conventional warp drive was now a matter of weeks. A simple hop across the luminous threads of this celestial latticework. It was the ultimate key to the library, a way to physically travel between the shelves. But with that key came a terrifying question. If this map has existed for eons, who else has been using it? Are we the first to be given this gift? Or are we merely the newest travelers on a road worn by countless feet? The silence of the bridge was no longer empty, but filled with the hum of infinite possibility, and the chilling whisper of the unknown paths that now lay open before them. The map of living light was no longer just a chart, but a living, breathing guide to the galaxy's hidden doors. It led us to a star system veiled in a nebula of ionized dust, a place our own surveys had never even glimpsed. The world we found there was a jewel of crystalline structures, a planet where the very mountains seemed carved from diamond and quartz. Initial scans were baffling, showing complex energy signatures that defied all known biological models. These were not carbon-based life forms like us, but beings of pure silicon, their consciousness woven into the resonant frequencies of the planet's geological network. We tried every standard hailing frequency, every linguistic algorithm, and received only silence. Our words were like rain falling on stone, unable to penetrate. It was the archive that gave us the key. Deep within its xenobiology records were the communication protocols for a dozen different silicon-based species, methods of conversation built not on sound, but on modulated magnetic fields and precise vibrational harmonics. We had the dictionary, but we still needed a voice. Chief Engineer Valeries, working with the holographic Thorn, reconfigured the Odyssey's main deflector dish. It was no longer a shield, but a giant speaker, capable of broadcasting complex magnetic pulses. We did not send words. We sent a simple, repeating mathematical sequence, the universal constant of pi, rendered not as a number, but as a rhythmic pulse in the planet's magnetic field. For hours, there was nothing. Then, the entire planet seemed to shiver. A mountain range in the distance began to glow with an internal light, pulsing back the same sequence, but with a subtle, complex variation added to the end. It was an answer. A conversation had begun. We were not just explorers making first contact. We were ambassadors, using a language borrowed from a library of ghosts to speak with a form of life we could never have understood on our own. The silicon entities showed us, through a cascade of beautiful, resonant patterns, the history of their world, a slow, patient symphony of geological time. In return, we shared the simple, chaotic melody of human experience. A new chapter of diplomacy was opened, not with a handshake, but with a synchronized hum across the electromagnetic spectrum. Our role was forever changed. We were no longer just the keepers of the archive. We had become its translators, its voice in the silent places between the stars, proving that the greatest treasure was not the knowledge itself, but the connection it made possible. If we can speak to a mountain, what other silent voices in the cosmos are waiting for someone who knows how to listen? The conversation with the Silicon World had proven the archive's power to connect, but its next revelation threatened to overwhelm us entirely. The holographic thorn guided us to a new sector of the database, one that did not record the past, but modeled the future. A vast, shimmering simulation unfolded before us, and for the first time we saw a vision of humanity transformed. In this one potential timeline, the knowledge we carried acted as a universal catalyst. Famine and disease became historical footnotes. Worlds were terraformed not through decades of struggle, but in years of harmonious effort. We saw humanity, no longer fractured by old rivalries, reaching out to guide other emerging species, weaving a tapestry of civilizations across the galaxy in a breathtaking golden age. It was a future of peace and limitless potential, a destiny so bright it was almost painful to behold. Then the simulation shifted. The same repository of knowledge in another set of choices became the ultimate weapon. We watched as factions hoarded specific technologies, creating insurmountable gulfs in power. The starships and energy sources that could have built paradises were instead forged into unstoppable fleets. This was a future of permanent, galaxy-spanning war, where the very tools of salvation were perverted into instruments of absolute control. A dark age from which there might be no return. The choice, the intelligence stressed in its calm, synthesized voice, is not preordained. It is yours. The burden we carried was no longer just about preserving history. We were now the custodians of humanity's fate, holding a key that could open a door to utopia or lock us into an eternal dystopia. The archive was not a roadmap, but a mirror, reflecting the best and worst of what we could become. Every decision we made from this moment, from which piece of data to share and with whom, would ripple through this model, pushing our reality toward one of those two starkly different stars. Could our species, with all its ancient flaws and divisions, be trusted to choose the light? The shipyard was not a place of docks and scaffolds, but a hollowed-out asteroid, its cavernous interior humming with the silent, precise dance of construction nanites. The Odyssey was held in a web of shimmering force, its familiar silhouette being systematically unmade and remade before their eyes. The old duranium hull plates were stripped away, replaced by a new skin that seemed to drink the light. Chief Engineer Valeries watched the process with a mix of awe and profound unease. The new meta-material is not just stronger, he reported, his voice echoing in the cavern. It is adaptive. It reads stress forces and incoming energy, then reorganizes its molecular structure to disperse or absorb the impact. It is like giving the ship an immune system made of armor. The transformation was more than skin deep. The massive engine nacelles were carefully detached, their familiar warp cores decommissioned. In their place, a new, impossibly compact system was integrated into the ship's spine. This was the quantum drive, a technology pulled from the deepest vaults of the archive. It did not push the ship through space, but rather folded the space around it, allowing for near-instantaneous jumps across light years. The survey ship that had once charted nebulae was gone. In its place was a ghost, a vessel of immense and silent power built from the blueprints of long-dead civilizations. It was no longer a tool for asking questions of the universe, but a fortress designed to protect the answers. This profound upgrade was not a reward, it was a necessity. They were no longer explorers who could run from danger. They were guardians who had to be prepared to stand their ground against any threat, whether it was a hostile ship or the terrifying weight of their own responsibility. With this new power humming in its veins, the Odyssey was reborn, a silent sentinel for a library of fire, ready to face the dark. The memorial hall was a pocket of profound silence within the humming ship. The crew stood in a loose circle around a simple, polished obsidian plaque, its surface etched with the name Marcus Thorn and the coordinates of the planet Kaleidos. There were no remains to honor, only the weight of a sacrifice that had forged them into something new. Captain Rostova's voice broke the quiet, not with a command but with a shared conviction. "We are no longer just explorers," she began, her gaze meeting each of theirs in turn. "We are the keepers of a flame that 1,000,000 worlds entrusted to us." One by one, they joined in, their voices weaving together into a single, solemn promise. "We swear to protect this archive, to guard its knowledge from those who would weaponize it or see it erased. We swear to use its gifts not for power, but for the betterment of all living things, to heal worlds and nurture life. And we swear to remain vigilant, to remember the silence that consumed the architects, so that we may never confuse the map for the territory, or the library for the living soul." The words hung in the air, a vow that bound them more tightly than any Star Command regulation ever could. This was not a duty assigned to them, but a purpose they had chosen and now consecrated with their collective will. In that moment, the Odyssey was no longer merely a ship, and they were no longer just its crew. They had become an order of guardians, and their oath was the foundation upon which the future of the archive would be built. Could a promise made in the quiet of a memorial hall be strong enough to hold back the tides of ambition and fear that had drowned gods? The new quantum drive hummed with a sound like folded silk, a vibration that resonated in their bones rather than their ears. With the ship transformed and their oath still echoing in the silence of the memorial hall, there was only one direction to go. Forward. Captain Rostova stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the star chart where a single, pulsing coordinate gleamed, a destination pulled from the archive's oldest navigational logs. It was a sector of space so remote it had no name in any human catalog, a blank spot on the map that the library's data hinted was anything but empty. Her command was simple, a release of pent-up potential. "Helm, set a course, maximum slipstream, let us see what is out there." The stars on the viewer did not streak into lines. They simply vanished, replaced by the impossible, fluid geometry of slipstream space. The Odyssey slid into the current, a silent arrow shot from the bow of a known universe into the heart of the absolute unknown. This was not another survey mission. It was the first true test of their guardianship, a voyage into the deep dark to see if their hard-won wisdom could hold against whatever waited in the silence. What new lock would they find, and did they carry the right key? The ghost of Marcus Thorn stood beside the command chair, a silent partner in their final reckoning. The mystery of Kaleidos was no longer a question to be answered, but a truth to be carried. The impossible planet had not been a cosmic error or a looming threat. It was a gift, a library and a grave all woven into one. Its discovery had cost them a friend and shattered their old understanding of the universe, only to replace it with a purpose so vast it redefined their very souls. The crew of the Odyssey would not return home as the same explorers who had left. They were forever changed, bound by a shared oath and a shared loss, their mission of discovery reborn as a sacred trust. They now sailed the silent sea of stars as shepherds of knowledge, their ship a moving sanctuary for the memories of 1,000,000 lost voices. They are armed with the hard-won lessons of the architect's silent extinction, and the hopeful, shining map of a future they must help build. This is the true resolution of their journey. The greatest cosmic mysteries do not lead to simple endings. They are gateways, profound and challenging, that force us to shed our old skins and step into new, more meaningful beginnings. What new chapter will they write with the ink of 1 billion years of history?